War is always catastrophe. Here, in 1918, the catastrophe was almost total. Like a tired lion, the great city of Stamboul crouched under an army of occupation. The once envied power and wealth of the Ottoman Empire was reduced to half-empty monuments, like the Dolmabahce Palace, that last great folly of the Sultans. The Allies of World War I, British, French, and Italian, held hostage Sultan Mehmet VI, his ministers and advisors, living relics of an empire that once reached from the gates of Vienna to the cataracts of the Nile, and from the Euphrates to Africa's Atlantic shore. What was left of Anatolia, homeland of the Turks, looked ripe for colonialization. While the Allies argued over the spoils, the country outside Istanbul dissolved into anarchy. Few imagined that a new and independent state could somehow emerge. The handful that did met in this house to plan a nation withdrawn to what their leader, Mustafa Kemal, already defined as the natural frontiers of Turkey. To create it, he used his prestige as a brilliant wartime general to secure a mandate from the Sultan to restore law and order in Anatolia. Before the British could countermand the mission, Kemal slipped out of Istanbul aboard a requisitioned coastal vessel. As the Bandirma skirted the Asian shore, heading north to the Black Sea, one May morning in 1919, the Allies searched for him and later arrested most of his associates. The palace guards might well have watched the passage of the man that would depose their master and declare Turkey a republic. Kemal's first strategic stroke was to head inland from the northern rim of Anatolia. With the Black Sea behind him, he mobilized survivors from the Ottoman armies and out of independent patriotic groups of very different and conflicting ideologies, welded together a national liberation movement. Diplomatic initiatives to divide the bickering Allies alternated with disobedience or armed resistance to their occupying forces. For the first time in centuries, Turkish women shared on equal terms in a national effort, carrying supplies and munitions to an army desperately short of everything except courage and generalship. Alone, Mustafa Kemal decided where and when to accept battle. Within a loop of the Sakarya River, he chose rising ground for a last-ditch defense. Autumn of 1922, the broken Allies understood that they must make peace with a new and quite different nation. 1 year later, Kemal, now a member of parliament, led a majority of the National Assembly to proclaim Turkey a republic. The Sultan fled. Reforms came thick and fast. The first women shed the veil, swept away with the fez, the caliphate, and Quranic law, replaced by a civil code and a modern faculty of law. To update his nation, Kemal ordered a new alphabet to replace the traditional Arab script, chosen for religious reasons, although unsuited to the true sounds of the old Turkish language. We must free ourselves from incomprehensible signs that for centuries have held our minds in an iron vice. To do so, he started his own phonetic research before appointing a language commission to complete in 3 months what others saw as at least a 5-year task. Newspapers experimented painfully with the new typefaces. Civil servants and teachers passed exams. Step by step, the nation switched. The new stands here with the old over the gateway of Istanbul University, one of 9 in the country, where Turks now take for granted their language and the easy access it gives them to international culture. Take from the West what is indispensable to an evolved people. Admit science and new ideas into your lives. If you do not, they will devour you. That such knowledge might be shared between the sexes was an extravagant idea 50 years ago. Kemal Ataturk had to argue his case and silence male critics. Women need even better education than men. Or are they not destined to be the mothers of men? If they do not share our social life, we shall remain backward, incapable of treating on equal terms with the West. To treat with the world on equal terms would begin with a system of compulsory education for which even the textbooks had to be written. And for the first time, they taught school children the story of the Turkish homeland. 10 civilizations, 10,000 years, the mosaic of peoples, styles, and creeds that fuse in modern Turkey. The story begins in the superb Ankara Museum, the buried treasures of the Hittites, riches undiscovered when the Republic was founded. The Hellenists spread their colonies around the edge of the Mediterranean and inland from the shores of Anatolia. Hillside cities like Pergama, its theater, where Cleopatra sat, the steepest ever built. Excavations continue each season through successive Roman and Greek cities, overlaid, built, destroyed, and rebuilt by the tides of conquest or earthquake. Rome's medical center was Hierapolis, called Cotton Cliffs, or Pamukkale in Turkish, after frosty white steps formed by minerals spilling down from the warm, healing springs above. They fill pools in flooded ruins around the fallen columns of a Roman temple. Constantinople was the city named by the Emperor Constantine, who moved his capital from Rome to the Bosphorus shores. The Byzantine Empire lasted 1,000 years, supported by the Christian kingdoms to the east. And in the valley of Cappadocia, new chapels are still being found, left by the little-known community that, to give thanks unto God for centuries of peace and isolation, hollowed from the rocks more than 300 churches. The skills of architects and craftsmen drawing their strength from antiquity are blended into the first Turkish cities of the 8th century Seljuk kings. Their own distinctive forms of construction and decorative style developed from Konya, their capital, down to the Mediterranean. By 1300, the Ottoman Turks had triumphed over the Seljuks to graft yet another tradition onto Anatolian history. Two epochs that blend when the Red Tower of the Seljuks provides a stage for today's Janissaries playing the military music of the old Ottoman armies. It was on the shores of the Bosphorus that the Ottoman Sultan Mehmet the Conqueror built his Rumeli Castle from which to conquer Constantinople. He reshaped it as his capital, Istanbul, buttressing the venerable Saint Sophia, building the first of monuments, great and small, that marked the Ottoman dominions. Most unique of all was the Topkapi Saray, the city within the city. Imperial mint, harem, viziers and sultans, center of an empire that disintegrated into chaos. It was an empire that had drawn its strength from thousands of humble villages, from the simple men of Anatolia.
The peasant, whose blood we have shed, sending him through 7 centuries to various parts of the world, whose bones we have left in foreign lands. We've taken and used his labor to repay him with contempt, with humiliation. The peasant, the producer, is the true lord and master of Turkey.
But 50 years ago, he was a producer without help or guidance. Even the switch from wooden plows to steel blades was innovation. When Ataturk died in 1938, there were only 1,000 tractors in this huge land. Today, nearly 500,000 machines sustain the agricultural boom that makes Turkey one of Europe's major food producers. In its 50th year, the Republic produces 15 times as much wheat as when it began, and 500,000 tons of cotton, where none was produced at all.
Toplamaya biraz daha dikkat ederiz.
Hopefully, many traditional crops will never be mechanized. All are vital exports for the economy that led Turkey to associate membership of the European Common Market. Just part of the policy of international cooperation on which Ataturk insisted long before the idea was generally accepted. Turks at a NATO meeting to stop oil pollution on the high seas find his words prophetic.
As a man regards his nation, so must he consider the peace and well-being of all the nations of the world. We cannot know what remote event can one day affect us.
This principle extends to national defense. To secure the independence recovered 50 years ago, Turkey is a partner in NATO's 15-nation collective defense system. In addition to considerable ground, sea, and air forces, she also plays a key part in Western Europe's new air defense network. Its right flank, anchored near Mount Ararat, 10,000 feet up in eastern Turkey. Radars and computers are appropriate weapons of defense in the 20th century. They can only be built and sustained upon a widely based industrial technology, almost non-existent when the Republic began. Today, taking over whole new areas of this still, uncrowded land. Four modern oil refineries that also process enough Turkish crude to provide half the nation's needs. Iron and steel from almost nothing to 4 million tons a year. And aluminium, a brand new industry that will yield 100,000 tons a year. Vital expansion and jobs for a nation of 40 million that was only 10 million when the Republic began. In a country as big as Britain, Italy, Belgium, Holland, Denmark, and Greece combined, priority must go to communications. The new international through route to Tehran crosses the inland sea of Van, where ferry boats for cars and trains are more practical than land routes. In the face of such distances, the Turks maintain modern domestic and international airways, linking the rest of the world to their many diverse regions and cities. The airline system radiates from Ankara, the half-forgotten citadel Ataturk selected as the nation's new capital. 50 years later, the citadel and a few government buildings are almost all that he would readily recognize. On a hilltop overlooking the city he willed into existence, Ataturk rests in a sober monument of Anatolian stone that is still a place of pilgrimage. Even the youngest Turks know of that November morning in the 15th year of the Republic, when time stopped at 9:05. By an irony of history, Ataturk died where his adventure began, in the Dolmabahce Palace. Ignoring the lavish furnishings, he used only a bare desk, and a simple leather work chair. But the clearest monument to his vision is under the windows of his death place. They look out on a city of a strength, pace, and vigor that surpasses all that even he could have hoped and worked for. To make his country, Ataturk slipped away between the twin villages on which the new Bosphorus Bridge now stands. A symbol of all that the Republic has achieved in its first half-century. But with his uncanny perception of things to come, he might well have measured this progress as no more than the foundations for the half-century ahead.